Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
As Ebola and hantavirus cases draw renewed attention, contractors are part of how the government builds capacity in public health emergencies, especially with large gatherings like the World Cup on the horizon. At the same time, a new Pentagon memo is putting more pressure on how contractors account for facility costs. Jim Carroll, CEO of the Professional Services Council, joins me now to connect those dots. Jim, thanks for joining me this morning.
Thank you, Terry, for having me on.
You know, a topic you and I don't talk a lot about is public health. And certainly it's been in the headlines. The World Health Organization is worried about another outbreak of Ebola. Hantavirus has been in the headlines. There is a role for public contractors to play here. Talk to us about what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, there always has been, certainly in modern history, for contractors to play a critical part in healthcare. Some of it is behind the scenes. Some of it is, just the processing of healthcare payments, Medicare, Medicaid, getting those through. But actually, contractors are very much on the front line as well, because they are able to develop the technology that actually helps people and saves lives. And this is the possibility that come about when true subject matter experts are given the expertise and the funding to develop quickly what is needed for public health. And you're right. Every morning, it seems that we wake up and there's something they're talking about. Most recently, it seems, through the weekend, through today, through yesterday, that hantavirus is certainly top of mind. The good news, I'll say before we get anyone too panicky, Terry, is that it does seem to be contained and limited. But what it shows really is the ability of contractors to scale up very quickly for this, for issues in the past. We can't forget COVID, a very sad time for many families and many individuals, as well as the impact on employment. And so, our contractors, our member companies were able to flex back then and quickly provide both the infrastructure, the workforce, as well as some of the research. And we'll be talking about that at PSC later this week as well. The timing is good. The Federal Health Conference for PSC is happening in just a day or two.
Tell me a little more about how contractors are actually providing execution level or operational level support. Where do they plug into the system, and what kind of services are they delivering when it comes to public health?
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing is they're the ones actually sometimes when vaccines are issued, contractors are the ones administering it. There's healthcare experts on the scene. And again, it's that ability to surge healthcare professionals to track it, the tracking that takes place, when they were talking about the last few days with hantavirus and being able to track where people have gone. So much of that is being done by contractors using the technology so that they know where to place people, where to find these individuals, and with whom they might have come in contact. And so it really does show that this is a live demonstration, I think, as what is actually happening with our contractors. And we're going to be talking about these issues with some very critical healthcare folks.
I don't want to leave this topic quite yet because we've got the World Cup coming up in just about a month, bringing people from all around the world into the North American continent.
Right.
What are contractors saying here about the risks they're facing? We usually think about this as a public safety problem, but it's also a public health problem.
Yeah, it is a public safety issue. One of our member companies, for example, on the safety side is providing technology not only at the stadiums themselves, but out in the parking lots where people are surging before and after a game. The technology to be able to keep people safe by monitoring for threats using tethered drones made right here in America. We're actually not too far from us in Virginia, with tethered drones being deployed at some stadiums, again, to sort of watch for safety issues. But we'll also have, and this is one of the things that we'll be talking about, the concerns of health issues and making sure, that with millions of visitors coming in from overseas, that the people across the board are protected and healthy. And so it's a really sort of fascinating time. They're comparing, I think it's 78 games, Terry, for the World Cup, and they're comparing each one to a little bit larger than a Super Bowl in terms of, global attendance and, of course, the popularity of going to the game itself. And so, earlier this year, we've had meetings with the head of security from DHS and the White House Task Force on Security for the FIFA games. Now we're talking, our member companies, we're setting up meetings with some of the healthcare folks. For example, the director of NIH, doing all the research and critical funding, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, he is coming to our healthcare conference this week, and our member companies will be talking to him. He'll be telling them the needs as we get closer and closer. And so it really is a timely conversation, and we're going to be able to dig in. Jennifer Johnson of HHS will be there as well. We're just going to have a range of experts about how contractors are playing a critical role and what else is needed. And so how contractors, there's still some time left and still some contracts that are out there, some that are surging now because of these additional healthcare concerns. We're trying to get a sense of those. We'll find out more. But the ability to provide, quick scaling, specialized expertise, and really the role of technology, which is just fascinating.
Jim Carroll is CEO of the Professional Services Council. Jim, I will want an out brief after your session this week so that we can catch up on all of those trends and actions. But I do want to touch on a different topic before we leave today, and that is a new memo in the Pentagon focused on contractor facility costs. What is going on there? What are they signaling? What are they trying to get after?
I think what the DOW is looking for is transparency, which are, at a base level, the contractors, our member companies are happy to provide. And so the community of government contractors coming out of the Pentagon just want to understand really is what are their overhead costs? What does make sure that as contractors, as all of us, and I'll tell you, Terry, even at PSC, our office is pretty small, but we're reevaluating our facilities cost, looking to see if we're getting the best deal possible. And so this is an encouragement to look at these companies that are doing the same thing. And, the companies want to provide the best value for the taxpayers. Ultimately, they're taxpayers too. And so they understand and support the need for transparency and making these cost efficient and reflect the, actual costs that are going out there. I'll just say from an overriding thing, again, we're happy to provide the transparency, work with them. The only thing that I want to make sure that everyone understands on the inside the Pentagon is that these contractors are playing such a critical role that looking into what they are doing is great, but to prejudge it is something that we're trying to make sure. And, Terry, we're used to this every, 4 years with a new administration, a new wave of folks, that it really is sometimes at least educating more than others, but educating folks about, how these costs actually work, making sure that they understand that the prices on some of the materials and technology that are being delivered, the services can vary. And if the government changes the contract midstream, just like if you're remodeling your home and the contractor is halfway through and you put in a change order, which is something I'm very familiar with. Hopefully my wife is listening, that sometimes it changes the bottom line. And it certainly is right now in our kitchen. And so the fact that change orders happen in our kitchen, the same things happen with the government changes their mind or tax slightly differently on a government contract. But we're fully willing and want to be transparent.
Jim, if this is a consensual agreement to be more transparent about overhead costs, is it going to translate into day-to-day operations? Is there going to be an increased reporting requirement or more data transmission or change in pricing strategies? How do you expect it to be implemented?
Yeah, I mean, anytime that there's a request for something that requires more time, that obviously does impact the bottom line. The idea of that transparency into it is perfectly fine. And so, we're happy to provide it, but every nuance that they want differently or put a different way or compared across other things can slow things down. And so, especially at a time when we're facing critical needs around the world for the Department of War and the activities that are taking place globally, our contractors are making great strides and providing not only magazine depth for some of the physical, tangible assets, but also directly on point with PSC are those people who are providing subject matter expertise. And if you're pulling them off during what they know the best to fill out a form, sometimes it's counterproductive.
So, given the operational op-tempo, I guess we'll just say, of what you've just described, do you think this memo is really just sort of a messaging signal? Hey, we really do care and we'd like you to start looking at this. Or do you think it's really going to change contractor operations in the short run?
It's probably a little bit too early to be precise. The Department of War Undersecretary Mike Duffy, who was very nice, came to our annual conference at the Greenbrier a couple of weeks ago. We had some one-on-one conversations, as well as him speaking, directly from the podium to our executives, to our folks, 400 or so PSC members. I think part of this is signaling that they just want to make sure that they understand, and we'll see how deep they really want to go. Thankfully, Undersecretary Duffy really understands this issue. He has a deep background in government contracting. He's been at OMB. He's been at the department previously. And so he's been a great ally to have, and we have a great working relationship with him and his staff.
I've been speaking with Jim Carroll. He's CEO of the Professional Services Council. Jim, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Take care.
We'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Subscribe to the Federal Drive wherever you get your podcasts.